Experimental affixes are powerful, and some of them can even be semi-build defining. Now normally, you encounter these by fighting exiled mages. They'll drop one experimental item when killed, and what you get on it is completely random. But sometimes you get something really cool. Maybe the experimental affix is exactly what you want. Maybe it's well rolled, or maybe it's even exalted. But there are also several crafting currencies which allow you to interact with experimental affixes, namely Rune of Research and Glyph of Insight, and that's what today's video is focused on. I decided to do this because I've been making several other Last Epoch crafting videos. You guys seem to really like them, seems to help a lot of people out, so be sure to get subscribed if you want to see more Last Epoch crafting content, and hey, leave a like while you're down there, because that's a great way to tell me to make more of these videos. But for now, let's get into things. Experimental affixes aren't random. So let's say I have these gloves. They're pretty darn nice. Tier 7 intelligence, phys res, hybrid health, chance to shred sealed, and some increased melee attack speed, which isn't very good, but otherwise, these would be a pretty awesome item. The base is mediocre, but still, a pretty darn awesome item. Except, what if I needed a little bit of extra mitigation, say for damage over time effects? Well, that's an experimental affix, which means it drops from exiled mages. Or does it? Because there's an item called Glyph of Insight, which I used before to mention how you could transform an affix and then seal it with Rune of Research. We're not going to be doing that today. Instead, we're going to be looking at what experimental affix I could put on this item. Remember, the prefixes are tier 2 and tier 7. The suffixes are tier 5 and tier 2. And there's a tier 2 chance to shred sealed. So now let's go over to Tenkiei, who has a handy calculator that can show you this. Because that's right, experimental affixes added via Glyph of Insight aren't random. All right, here we go. So tier 2, tier 7. Those are the prefixes. Tier 2, tier 5, tier 2. This means it will have armor mitigation also applies to damage over time, along with some nice little flat armor. If this was maybe tier 3, instead it'd be ward gain on kill and ward decay threshold. Which, honestly, probably you could level up the hybrid health and do exactly that. Alternatively, if both of these were tier 3, might be a little bit harder. Dodge rating. Also, that's probably honestly worse than this. Who knows, maybe this goes up to tier 5. Current health loss per second, missing health gained is ward per second. So if I was playing a low life build, I'd absolutely want to use an item that has total tiers of 21 to get tier 5 missing health, which isn't exactly easy, but with exalted items isn't that hard either. So just to show that this actually does work, this is the expected result here. And if we come back in game and use that Glyph of Insight, the actual result is exactly what was expected. Tier 4, armor applies to damage over time. Now I could even try to finish out this item using my hybrid health shards, and fail to finish it. But hey, it's still pretty darn good, and I have a build that I might be cooking which could use it. So I'm not exactly unhappy with the outcome. The same can be done for boots and any other item that can roll experimental affixes. Right now it's gloves, boots, and belt. So let's say this. What would this experimental affix be? Let's check Tenkiei. Remember, it's 5, 5, 6, 3. The answer is none, because while you can seal a tier 5 affix, you cannot upgrade since there's no way to craft on it. There are a few limitations of the system. Another limitation is that it only works on replacing prefixes, not suffixes. That said, experimental affixes are still incredibly powerful, and they're a huge benefit to your build if you can work them in. For quite a while, I was using experimental affix on my boots, until I got these absolutely insane boots very recently, right after I made the video, of course. If you need more Glyphs of Insight, just be sure to seal, well, I'd say random affixes, but ideally it should be random high tier affixes, because the chance depends on the odds here. This is also how, if you ever see an item with tier 6 plus sealed, yep, you can seal tier 5 and tier 6. You just can't actually add them. This is a perfect example. These boots, yeah, they have sealed tier 5 experimental minion damage from a Rune of Research. See if I have any examples that I can use here just to demonstrate that. Here we go, this pair of Spellblade gloves. Right now it has the ward on kill, ward decay threshold, tier 5 experimental. If I come right here and use a Rune of Research, now it has a sealed tier 5 affix. Normally you cannot seal tier 5, but this is the one exception which proves the rule. Sealing tier 4 and tier 5 are the best ways to get your Glyphs of Insight to use for either sealing other things or potentially forcing an experimental affix on an item, such as the armor applies to damage over time or gain ward based on missing health. In most of Last Epoch's crafting systems, there's an element of RNG. You won't always be able to craft what you want. Something might use too much forging potential. A glyph might roll the exact worst mod and then crit, preventing you from re-rolling it. So it's kind of comforting and also very interesting that this is the one exception to the rule. It means certain items have implicitly much higher value than they otherwise would, because otherwise it would be a gamble. It would be random. But in this case, if you have the right base, you can put on exactly the experimental affix you want. But as cool as the experimental affix system is, right now I'd say it's pretty limited. It only applies to very specific builds. And then there's some generic ones on things like boots, which are nice, for sure, but not really build defining. And as the start of a system, I think it's a very cool idea, but I'd also like to see it expanded in the future. I'd also like to see a couple more fully deterministic crafting systems. I understand why you can't have every item be fully deterministic. That would be bad, because then you'd only need one base and you'd get what you want and then run out of potential upgrades. And honestly, as long as the system doesn't feel oppressive, an element of RNG can be fun. However, when it comes to finishing items in certain ways, I would definitely prefer a couple of more deterministic things, such as, for example, rerolling implicits a little more deterministically, because right now that's a very frustrating one and it burns a lot of forging potential. And in most cases, it doesn't really give enough benefits in return. Something else that I could see being made a little bit more deterministic was something that consumed all of the forging potential remaining on an item, i.e. it's the last step you do, that transforms one resistance into another resistance of your choice. That's one of those quality of life things that Path of Exile added with Harvest that I honestly truly grew to like. It's so nice to be able to just swap one res here and there. I'm not saying doing it all the time, like I said. Requiring forging potential to be on the item and then using all of it up means there's a lot of crafting projects you just wouldn't be able to do it on. But having the option there occasionally would be really, really nice, especially since there's so many resistances in Last Epoch, and sometimes you end up just a little bit short on one and a little bit over on another. That leads me to an important question. What do you think that EHG should do to expand on their crafting system? Leave some of your thoughts down in the comments below. Disclaimer, I'm not a dev. I mean, I'd hope that's obvious, but yeah, I can't make it happen. But hey, maybe some cool discussion will come out of it, and you never know who's watching the videos. On the other hand, if you want to know more about crafting in Last Epoch, oh boy, do I have guides for you. So feel free to check through all the guides up in the card and down below, and find what you want to watch next. Before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make crafting guides like this and much, much more possible. Link to support is down below. And also, a big thanks to everyone who watched to the end. I hope you learned something, I'm glad you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again in the next one.